Your fantasy playoffs are finally here, and believe it or not, you can still actually improve your team on the waiver wire. Because this week's wire is surprisingly good after multiple injuries on Sunday, so here are the players you need to add before your friends do. And we'll begin with Isaiah Davis, the 5th-round rookie for the Jets out of South Dakota State, because this past week, Breece Hall was ruled out of this game. He aggravated an MCL injury. Apparently, this is an average of 2 to 3 weeks to recover from, and all he just did was miss 1 week. So there's a good chance that he's also going to miss week 15, and at that point, with the Jets eliminated from playoff contention, they might just shut down Breece Hall. Now, I know some of the earlier reports are stating, oh, they don't have any plans of shutting down Breece Hall. Yeah, but what happens in a couple of weeks, we'll see then. As of right now, it looks like he's going to miss at least another 1 to 2 games. And in their first game without Breece Hall this past Sunday, the Jets played really well. It was Aaron Rodgers' first 300-yard passing game in like 3 years, and you can see right here, the backfield was split dead even. Braylon Allen, 37 snaps, according to PFF. Isaiah Davis, 36. You scroll over to the overall touches, 11 carries for Braylon Allen, 9 for Isaiah Davis, 7 targets for Isaiah Davis. So 16 opportunities to 16 opportunities. It was literally a dead even split backfield, where that really wasn't the case coming in. At least the expectations were Braylon Allen, who saw larger workloads earlier in the year, would continue to see those now that Breece Hall was out. And although Braylon Allen's workload was fine, we still saw a ton of Isaiah Davis early and often in this game. He scored a long touchdown early in this game. He ended up getting 4 yards per carry. He turns 13 touches, 16 opportunities into 67 yards and a score. He outproduces Braylon Allen in this game against Miami, which is not an easy run defense, or at least defense in general, to be running on at least the past month or two since they've been healthy. So it was a good day for the rookies for the Jets in the backfield, especially Isaiah Davis. And for a little background on Davis, he's a big back. So is Braylon Allen. Braylon Allen's 230 pounds, but they got some 2 big backs in this backfield. You scroll over here to the overall rushing, or at least athletic testing stats according to Player Profiler. Okay, he's a strong back based on his size. That kind of makes sense. In terms of speed, though, he just kind of has average speed. He's not like Braylon Allen, who has overall probably, I would say, more agility, a little bit more burst than an Isaiah Davis, but Davis has been playing well. Now, the knock on Davis coming out of college was that he played at South Dakota State, a small school, but if you look at between 2022, when he had nearly 1,500 rushing yards, and 2023, no running back in college football combined these 2 years had more total rushing yards than Isaiah Davis. It was him. He was the #1 graded PFF rusher during that time. He also had 20 receptions per season, which is a very strong mark to hit for a college running back. So everything kind of looks good for Isaiah Davis here. Of course, the Jets offense, it was just 1 game. It took the best game from Aaron Rodgers in years for both these running backs to get there. But if we're talking down the stretch into the fantasy postseasons for at least another week, potentially 2 weeks, especially if you lost this past week, potentially Breece Hall, maybe a Bucky Irving who got banged up, some other running backs as well dealing with injuries. Well, if we look at the Jets' schedule moving forward, a great matchup upcoming against the Jaguars. In a game that should stay close or neutral, we can maybe see another 12 to 15 touches for these guys. Matchups against the Rams at home and the Bills are also positive matchups for running backs so far this year, although the Rams defense has been getting healthier and better. So I think Isaiah Davis is worth an add. I mean, at this point, fab budget doesn't matter. So if you have $20 left and you want to put it all on Isaiah Davis, sure. The next guy I think we have to talk about is Sincere McCormick at this point for the Las Vegas Raiders. McCormick, we first saw him really start to get some usage back on Black Friday in week 13. You can see right here in week 13, he sees 38% of the snaps. This was with Alexander Mattison and Zamir White out. Amir Abdullah started this game, but McCormick was highly involved, seeing 48% of the rush attempts in this game. He would go on in that contest to have 12 touches for 65 yards. He easily outproduced Amir Abdullah on far fewer snaps and overall opportunities. So that was kind of the start of, okay, maybe last week we came on this video and said, let's see what happens with Sincere McCormick. Let's see what happens with Zamir White and Alexander Madison's health. Well, those guys were both ruled out once again in week 14, and here's what happened. McCormick goes out there and he ends up just taking the backfield away, which some people were implying this would happen. My own colleague over at Yahoo and Jason Fitz said a similar thing, that he was hearing out of some Vegas people he knew. McCormick was the guy that they liked. He sees 41 snaps to just 26 for Amir Abdullah. We scroll over to the overall opportunities. It's all the McCormick show. 15 carries, just 1 for Abdullah. Both of them see 2 targets. This leads to another nice day for Sincere McCormick, who sees 17 total touches for 89 yards, doesn't find the end zone in a fine matchup against Tampa Bay. He puts up 10.9 points for you, back-to-back weeks where he's a worthy flex option, and another week where he's just strongly taking back this backfield. Of course, we'll have to see what happens with Alexander Mattison and Zamir White's health moving forward. It seems like Mattison was close to returning this week, but there's a chance. McCormick has been their most efficient back so far this season on his small 2-game sample. There's a decent chance they just keep giving him the rock. If you're not familiar, he has basically just been on practice squads the last couple of years at UTSA, a small school in college. He did put up back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons, albeit again a small school. But it'll really come down to what happens with these guys. I think McCormick has already taken over Zamir White's role, and I think for the most part he's probably taken over Alexander Madison's role, but it's hard to say what Antonio Pierce is going to do with this offense. It's been a little bit random all year in the backfield and offense in general, but the matchups are nice. At home against the Falcons, at home against the Jaguars, and then the Saints is an elite matchup in the fantasy championship. Like, the Raiders backfield has awesome fantasy playoff schedules and matchups. It's just regardless, who the heck is going to get the rock? Right now, McCormick is the most efficient. He can't be on waiver wires is basically the best way to put this. All right, fellas. Now, before we keep going, I got to tell you about something exciting, and it's our fantasy blueprint. And this video sponsor, Vivid Picks. If you love fantasy sports or just enjoy making predictions like I do, then this app is for you. Because Vivid Picks makes it extremely simple to get in on the action. Because all you do is pick players, make your predictions, and then watch the games unfold. It is that easy. Now, personally, my favorite mode over there on Vivid Picks is the more or less, because it's simple. Will more or less this player get over their stats, their yards, their touchdowns, their pass attempts, whatever it might be. And I've actually taken a play for tonight's Monday Night Football game for Week 14. If you're watching this after the game has already unfolded, they'll already have options up for Thursday Night Football or even across a bunch of different sports. I took both quarterbacks, Cooper Rush and Joe Burrow, to go over their passing yards numbers. These are two of the worst secondaries in the NFL. With a game that has a nice total, I think we're going to see a lot of pass attempts for both teams to keep up. Easily Rush go over. Burrow at 276.5. The guy's throwing 45 times per game the past month. I like that as well, and he has all his receivers healthy. Now, here's the exciting part. If you're brand new to Vivid Picks and you deposit with code SAL for the first time, they will give you a deposit bonus up to $250, meaning if you put in 25, you get 25 right back extra. If you put in 250, you get a free $250 bet right back. So if you're ready to start making your predictions and take advantage of that juicy deposit bonus, download the Vivid Picks app now and use code SAL to start dominating today. Big thank you to Vivid Picks for sponsoring the Fantasy Blueprint in this channel. Now let's get back into it. And we have to go to the 49ers backfield again. Another injury in the 49ers backfield. It has been doom and gloom all year, and for years now, honestly, with the 49ers running backs. Isaac Rendo, who is having a great game, their rookie. He was filling in for Jordan Mason and Christian McCaffrey. He gets a foot injury, likely a sprain. They're going to have to see what the x-ray says. You get a little bit more information here from SportsMD Analysis on Twitter. He says severity is completely unclear right now. It's a questionable tag, suggests no fracture, which is a good thing, but we need to probably see the MRI on Monday. Did you just hear my voice crack? It's 5 in the morning. I have a little bit of a sore throat. We're trying to get through it right now, but we're going to have some voice cracks. It's okay. Now, it's not okay is what this leaves in the 49ers backfield. It leaves Patrick Taylor, who was not even on the team as of a week ago. They had to re-sign him to their practice squad. He was active for this past game. It leaves Keyshawn Vaughn, who, if anybody knows anything about Keyshawn Vaughn in fantasy football the past month, or the past 3 to 4 years, I should say, he's an extremely overrated, extremely slow, inefficient back who used to play for the Bucs. And then they do have Israel Abanikanda, who is a second-year player, kind of an exciting player out of the College of Pittsburgh, or Pittsburgh in general. He didn't play this past week. They signed him to their practice squad. He comes over from the Jets. So these are like the 3 running backs we have to choose from. It's no idea who's going to be the most involved. Probably Patrick Taylor, but we don't know. So if you just want to take some stabs at all of these guys, I would say Keyshawn Vaughn's pretty much dust, but in this system, he can maybe work. I would rank it Patrick Taylor, then Israel Abanikanda, assuming that the Isaac Rendo sprain, the foot sprain, which usually a foot sprain is going to be, minimum 2 to 3 weeks for most of these guys. If that shuts Isaac Rendo down, Patrick Taylor becomes a priority, then Abanikanda, Keyshawn Vaughn if you really need to. In terms of the matchups for these guys, we get a short week, Thursday night, so it's pretty unlikely that Isaac Rendo does play, so you're going to get a guy there to start potentially. Then it's the Dolphins, who we just saw give up a lot of production to the running back this past week in that position for the Jets, and then it's the Lions at home, which is not a terrible matchup based on how many injuries the Lions are dealing with, but those guys can maybe be healthy by then. In general, I'm not excited about this backfield now, but we do have to replace them somehow, and maybe you need some starters for the fantasy postseason. Now, if we go to another position here, it's another rookie we can talk about, and that is going to be Jaylen McMillan, who's been a guy that we've been hoping would break out the entire season, right? This was a guy that when Chris Godwin went down and Mike Evans went down in the same game, we were like, the new number 1 receiver for Baker Mayfield's McMillan. He's going to pop off, right? Wrong. He didn't pop off any of those weeks. We'll get into that more in a second, but this past week in week 14 with Mike Evans back, McMillan did not see as much attention on him, and he played pretty well. Played 49 snaps here, ran 29 routes, a team high with Mike Evans, and he led the team with 7 targets. This led to by far his best game of the season. I believe McMillan had a 2-touchdown game earlier this year, maybe back in week 2, but this was his best performance of the year. 21 fantasy points, catches 4 of 7 targets in a nice matchup against the Raiders, scores 2 touchdowns in this one. Of course, the 2 touchdowns won't happen every week, but this was good to see from McMillan, who, like I said earlier, basically did nothing when Chris Godwin was out and Evans earlier this year. And when I mean nothing, I mean nothing. Let's scroll down to his performances. The dude caught 1 ball for 6 yards. Then he did not play. They said that he was going to play, but he basically didn't play. He was like a healthy scratch, although he suited up. Then he has 3 catches for 15 yards. These are his yardage totals on Player Profiler. 35 yards. He has 11 yards, 25. Like, the guy is literally struggling to just get you 5 to 6 fantasy points. He comes out this next week and he pops off. And I do think there's something to this. He's a rookie who's breaking out later in the season with less defensive attention on him with Mike Evans back. I think those things that kind of all add up and are trending in the right direction. If you're not familiar with McMillan, he does come from the University of Washington, where he played with Michael Penix. He had a 1,000-yard season, then he got banged up his senior. He put up 500 yards. He was battling with not only Rome Odunze there, but also Jalen Polk, who went in the second round to the Patriots. So McMillan is a okay receiver. Like, I would just call him like an average receiver, and that's basically where he got drafted, in the 3rd round, which for the most part, there's a lot of hits in the 3rd round of the NFL draft, but there's also a lot of average receivers for a reason. I'd be prioritizing the running backs in general here, but if you look at the schedule for the Buccaneers, like a matchup against the Chargers this week, okay, it's a little bit of a tougher defense, nothing too scary, but then you get the Cowboys, the Panthers, and if your league plays in week 18 for some reason, the Saints. So a really really nice end of season schedule, obviously for Mike Evans, for the running backs. Hopefully Bucky Irving gets healthy, and then definitely for McMillan here. Speaking of Bucky Irving getting healthy, yeah, Bucky Irving got hurt this past week. Not only did he enter the game with a pretty big injury, he ends up re-injuring his back. He entered the game with a hip and a back injury. He ends up re-injuring his back. It's said that he could play through this injury, but it typically would get worse. Week 15, he's at high risk of missing right now, is what SportsMD analysis says, and then there would be a drop in production if he did play. So there's a decent chance at this point for the Bucs, who are in playoff contention to win their division, there's a decent chance that they let Bucky Irving sit at least one game, especially based on how well Rachaad White has been playing lately, and they have Sean Tucker. Sean Tucker, the guy I showed you earlier in this video, because he becomes the waiver ad. Odds are Rachaad White is rostered in all of your leagues. Sean Tucker in this game, we can just see right here, he only plays 11 snaps, but that's because, he basically only played in the second half for the most part. Bucky Irving got hurt right before the half, then he did not come out the entire second half. So Sean Tucker in this game, if you were to look at it, basically does nothing. So like when people are comparing him to Isaiah Davis and Sincere McCormick, you should want those guys over Sean Tucker, but he does nothing because he only sees 3 carries. But on those 3 carries, he averages over 15 yards per carry. Something he's done all season long now is be extremely efficient. 6 yards per carry, 7.7 yards per touch this year. If we pull up what Ryan Heath had to say over on Twitter from Fantasy Points here, he said in the second half of this game, when Bucky Irving was not out there, Rachaad White received 79% of the backfield carries, including the goal line touchdown. This kind of makes sense. Sean Tucker mixed in for 3 carries and 2 targets all after Irving left. So Sean Tucker got 5 opportunities in the second half, but it makes sense. He wasn't kind of prepared for this game to be involved. Rachaad White was already out there with a hot hand. He's going to get the usage, and Sean Tucker did fumble at the goal line in week 12, so that might be part of this a little bit in terms of his lack of usage. If you are not familiar with Tucker, obviously he had the breakout game earlier this year where he went for 37 fantasy points, was the RB1 on the week. Only his teammate Chris Godwin scored more points across all positions than Tucker against the Saints, and he's a really dynamic back. 4.4 speed, has good strength here. You can see 95th percentile strength according to Player Profiler, has good size. The reason why he basically did not do anything in terms of the NFL the first year of his career was because, well, he had some medical issues out of Syracuse. He probably would have been like a 3rd or 4th round running back. Those medical issues led to him being undrafted. Because you can see his college production was great. In his second year of college, he puts up 1,500 rushing yards. In his final year, he puts up 1,000 rushing yards on a little bit less carries due to some of those medical issues, but he does catch 36 balls. So this is a guy who can work on all 3 downs. He has the size to be a pass protection back and a pass down back on 3rd down. He has the size to be a goal line back, which they were trying to make him do in week 12 when he had a goal line touchdown, but then he fumbled the goal line opportunity. So we'll see what happens with him in week 15. Sean Tucker is worth a stash, and Tank Bigsby is now available in over 60% of leagues. Now, if you're in some sicko leagues like me and you, we know like this guy's probably not available, but he was dropped in a lot of leagues because of the bye week, because of his poor performances. But in week 14, he came out and he looked pretty good. An offense in Jacksonville that has not been the greatest, but has been able to stay close in games like this past week against Tennessee. So if they stay close in games, Tank Bigsby, the guy who doesn't catch passes, not out there on passing downs, he'll get more snaps. 31 snaps to 28 for Travis Etienne. We scroll over to the opportunities. Absolute crazy here. 18 carries for Tank Bigsby, just 4 for Etienne, 2 targets for Tank Bigsby as well. He ends up turning this usage into a nice day. Now, I'm sure most people didn't start him, especially in a matchup against Tennessee, but Tennessee had a lot of injuries here. He turns 19 touches into 62 yards, wasn't efficient in this one, but does find a touchdown in general. And if we scroll over to here to Ryan Heath again, he puts out on Twitter, Tank Bigsby received 82% of the backfield carries, including the only carry inside the 10-yard line. He never previously held over 65% of the carries in a game this year. So this was by far the best backfield usage for Bigsby. I don't really know if this is a trend or if this was just like a one-off game. I don't know how often Jacksonville will be able to lead in games or stay close in games. But the point being is that Tank Bigsby is still very live. Like this could have easily just been, okay, Travis Etienne's going to get the 12 to 14 carries and Bigsby will get in for 4 or 5. No, they made it pretty deliberate to say that Tank Bigsby is the guy that we want in this game, the identity of our offense. This is something that I think we should monitor because Bigsby ranks top 3 in broken tackle rate. He's averaging 5.6 yards per touch entering the week. And now if you look at the schedule, like I don't know how often Jacksonville will stay close in games, but they have the schedule to do it. The Jets look good this past week, but Jacksonville gets them at home next week. Then the Raiders, who are down to like Desmond Ridder at QB, and then the Titans team again that they just led to a 10-9 or a 10-9 score, close game. Will Levis got banged up. We'll see what his status is moving forward. So yeah, Jacksonville should stay in these neutral to positive game scripts. We probably see at least a dozen touches a game moving forward for Tank Bigsby. That's worth adding. A little bit of a deeper league one here for you and a sneakier one. Kendre Miller did return from the IR this past week. Kendre Miller's former coach Dennis Allen, it's been reported now that he put Kendre Miller on IR for a second time this season for no reason. Kendre Miller could have been playing. There was some stuff going inside turmoil, obviously, with the Saints. Dennis Allen just didn't like Kendre Miller for whatever reason and literally put the guy on IR just to put him on IR. But the good news for Miller was that he was back, and this past week he played 18 snaps, which was good to see. Really, no running backs behind Alvin Kamara have gotten any use this year. But if you scroll over, those 18 snaps led to 10 carries and 1 target. So that's pretty good usage overall. And this led to Miller turned these 10 carries into 32 yards. He ends up scoring a touchdown as well in a good matchup against the Giants. Now, here's the thing. He wasn't all that efficient, but it was his first time coming back from IR, second time coming back from IR this season, first game back, I should say. But here's the thing with Miller. The Saints have nothing to play for. They're now without Derek Carr. The offense in general stinks. I don't know why you're going to put your older running back in Alvin Kamara out there these last couple of games. He's going to play, but maybe we start to see more of a split with Kendre Miller. Deeper leagues worth an ad. Romeo Doubs is also worth an ad, who's now been dropped in a ton of leagues because he's missed the past 2 weeks with a concussion. In general, the Packers wide receivers have been hard to pin down this season, but he should return from a concussion this week. And if he does, he likely goes back to being a top 2 option in the Packers wide receiver room. Like in terms of snaps and routes this year, Romeo Doubs has basically been number 1 all season long in snaps and routes, ahead of Jaden Reed, ahead of Christian Watson. So if he's going to go out there in this really good Packers offense and let's just say run 30 to 35 routes a week for this offense, that's going to lead to like 6 to 8 plus targets. I think that's worth having on your rosters, especially when we look at the Packers schedule. They're going to be in some competitive games. The Seahawks on the road this week, has big playoff contentions. Week 17 against the Vikings, that has big wild card seeding, potentially even division, which at this point most likely doesn't though. But these are just big games where the Packers maybe have to throw a little bit more. The Saints is a solid matchup just in general in the passing and running attack. So I think the Packers wide receivers and overall offense is live rest of season, especially Doubs, who maybe is the number 1 receiver. Speaking of number 1 receivers, Adam Thielen is definitely the number 1 receiver for the Panthers, still available in over 55% of fantasy leagues, even though he just had a brutal matchup this past week. I thought it was all going to come crashing down for Adam Thielen. He goes out there, he earns 11 targets. For the second straight week, he leads his team in targets. He runs 35 routes. Against the Eagles' number 1 secondary, he puts up 9 catches, 102 yards, 11 targets. It wasn't just all garbage time. This game was close throughout the entire time. Adam Thielen is legitimately producing these last 2 weeks. He's now been back from injury for 3 weeks. In his last 2 games with a full-time role, basically getting ramped up, he's averaging 10 targets per game, 100 yards per game, 20 fantasy points per game, finding the end zone as well during that time. He's producing top 12 wide receiver numbers the past couple of weeks. And of course, it's helpful when there's really not much competition. Xavier Legette had a big drop this past week. Jalen Coker continues to be banged up far behind Adam Thielen. David Moore's out there running routes, earning some targets, but nothing crazy. They have tight ends as well, but it's like Adam Thielen is a clear priority for Bryce Young. It's pretty similar to what it was last year as well for Bryce Young. Young is just playing much better. The past month of the season, Bryce Young entered week 14 as a top 5 graded quarterback the past month. I assume that's only going to remain the same or go up after his performance against the Eagles, which was another solid game. And when you look ahead at the playoff schedule for at least fantasy playoffs, at home against the Cowboys, great spot for Adam Thielen. At home against the Cardinals, Cardinals defense is quietly getting a lot better, but still not a brutal spot. And then on the road against the Bucs in the fantasy championship. I mean, 3 of the better games you can find yourself in, especially this Bucs and Cowboys matchup for Thielen. He remains a start in week 15 and really every week in your lineups now. So make sure Thielen's not on your waiver wires. And then also just a guy coming out of a bye week to discuss here is Jeremy McNichols. Now, a lot of people will remember what Chris Rodriguez did before the Commanders bye in week 13. He had 94 yards and a touchdown, put up 15.5 fantasy points, but also keep this in mind. The Commanders got up 28-0 early in the second quarter on the Titans. They pulled their starters in the fourth quarter. Chris Rodriguez didn't get any usage until the fourth quarter. He was the RB3 on this team. So what does that tell you? And based on the first 3 quarters of usage, Brian Robinson is the clear RB1. McNichols was the RB2 who actually saw double-digit opportunities in that game, and Eckler remains on IR. So a lot of people probably added Chris Rodriguez this week during his bye to stash him. Maybe they'll add him this week because they'll remember he put up 94 rushing yards in week 13. He's the RB3 on this team. It goes 1 Robinson, number 2 McNichols. That's who you should be adding, McNichols, if anybody. And a tight end worth adding, and we have to see what happens now with this Derek Carr injury. It doesn't seem good, but Juwan Johnson, because Taysom Hill's done for the year, so we knew we were going to get more Juwan Johnson, and that's what we got this past week. Johnson goes out there, he catches 4 or 5 targets, 50 yards and a touchdown, but the problem now is this Derek Carr injury. Like, it's really hard to get excited about this offense when Desmond Ritter's going to be out there, and Derek Carr fractured his hand. Potentially he's going to be in the concussion protocol as well. He's done for the season based on this hand fracture is my guess. It's not official yet, but that would be my guess, right? If you're a quarterback, you kind of need your hands. So if Juwan Johnson seems too sketchy to you, I get that. You can probably add who are available in over 60% of leagues. Hunter Henry coming off of his bye week for the Patriots, and Zach Ertz coming off of his bye. Those guys are going to be borderline top 10 to top 12 tight ends this week. So these have been the players that you should add before your friends do. Now later this week, we'll have some players that are in the best matchups for the week 15 games, the playoff matchups at the running back and wide receiver positions. Those videos will pop up right here. But for now, if you enjoyed this content, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Appreciate you all a ton. See you in the next one.